Hello everyone, Donnie Wanders here, and today I have wandered to Burntcoat Head Park on the Bay of Fundy in Hants County, Nova Scotia. I'm at Burntcoat Head Park, which is on the Bay of Fundy, and the Bay of Fundy has some of the highest tides in the world. Right now we are just a few minutes from high tide today, and this is what it looks like. Lots of people enjoying the beautiful scenery. There's this lovely island over here, and of course the beautiful cliffs of the Bay of Fundy. So this is all sandstone, which gives the water and the sand, of course, below it that has eroded, that beautiful, rich, reddish brown color. If you're like the visitors behind me, I've kind of heard them chit-chatting a little bit about what it looked like at low tide. So they were here, most of them were here earlier today. I was here earlier this year. I didn't quite make it back for a high tide for several months. So that's why what I'm doing here today is checking out high tide. But we're not here just to experience high tide. Let me show you what it looks like at low tide. The amazing thing about this park are the tides. That's the real showstopper here. The highest tides in the world are here in the Bay of Fundy, and where I'm walking right now is about the midway point between the low tide line and the high tide line. So behind me, in this direction, you can see the ocean is out there behind me, and then in this direction you can see cliffs behind me, and you can just stroll along on the ocean floor. And it's quite wet here. I'm wearing rubber boots today because it's a mix of sand, sandstone, some aquatic plants, still a little bit of tide water sort of running back in tiny little rivulets back to the ocean. The tide here, though, the vertical tide, is about 16 meters, which is like 50-ish feet. But the horizontal tide is about a kilometer. It's really quite dramatic here. So you can walk, depending on where you are and the exact shape of the cliffs behind me and the shapes of the sandstone, 750 to 1,000 meters. So it's like a kilometer. It is, it's far. And I'm here at about an hour before lowest low tide. So that tide out there is still falling behind me. It won't fall too much more. And then when the tide changes and starts to rise, everything that you see that I'm walking on here, all of this is going to be full of water about 50 feet above my head. It's shocking. And what's so cool is it does this twice a day. The tide rises and falls twice a day. If you decide to come visit this park, make sure that you time it so that you're here. I don't know, they recommend about that you're off the ocean floor at least 3 hours before high tide. So you could plan your trip here to come out for about, maybe 2 to 3 hours before low tide, right up until about 3 hours after low tide, something like that. Now, if you don't know much about tides, there are tide tables. And tide tables are tables that are published by the federal government. I think it's DFO looks after the tide tables. And they predict to the minute when lowest low tide will be and when highest high tide will be. And the tides do vary. They're not exactly every 6 hours. And they're not always the same amount of time between each tide. So make sure that if you visit here or visit anywhere that is tidally influenced, that you are checking the tide table. Tide tables in the old days used to be published in the newspapers for the local area in just a few places. But now you can look up almost any location on a shoreline and get a low tide, or get the tide schedule to within typically a few kilometers, at least here in Nova Scotia. So there is a tide table specifically for this area. I expect that there is maybe a tide gauge here that provides some really accurate measurements, but I'm not sure about that. But that's the tide is the showstopper out here, and that could be, that figuratively, but also quite literally. You don't want to get trapped out here when the tide starts coming in, because it doesn't just sort of wash in. Tides don't just wash in, in a straight line across the shoreline. They follow all the dips and gullies and things. So a shoreline like this, some parts of it will fill up faster than others, and you don't want to be out on, say, a high point and have the tide kind of come in around you, and then you can't get back to your car. I want to show you some of the marine life that you can visit while you're here at Burntcoat Head, or anywhere in the Bay of Fundy, or really along the coastline in Nova Scotia. These are aquatic plants here. They're very, very slippery. So if you come here, be careful walking on these, because they can be quite slick. And then on the rocks, we have these little things are barnacles. So those, you'll find them on the bottoms of boats, and they're super, super hard. You can walk on them without hurting them because they have a super hard shell. And then there's these little guys. These guys are periwinkles, and these guys are just they're little snails that cling to these rocks, and they live typically in tidal zones. So they'll hang on to the rocks here when the tide comes in, and they'll just kind of stay put in these giant tides. And the other neat thing here is, like I said earlier, it's mostly a hard bottom. This is a hard rock interspersed with a little bit of sand here and there, and the sand can be quite slippery too, so you just have to be careful. And then there are these pools, so these little low areas in the rocks that stay wet, whether it's high tide or low tide. I think these little pools have eroded out, and that water stays put. Today I have opted to wear my rubber boots, and although they don't have the best traction, they will keep my feet nice and dry, and they're very easy to wash off. When you're visiting here, you will be walking across hard sandstone, like what I'm walking on right now, with a little bit of water. But there are also areas where it's kind of mucky sand. There's also just kind of just nice granular sand. But there's also quite a lot of seaweed and other aquatic plants, and they are very slippery. So if you're coming out here, so here's an example. I'm just coming back into like this stuff here that I have my foot on. It can be like when you're walking on it, it can be very, very slippery. So just be mindful of that. You don't want to, I don't want to fall down here today, although if I do, a little bit of sand and a little bit of water isn't gonna hurt me. But yeah, so just be mindful of that you could wear sneakers here, but you will probably get wet feet. I'm standing in the ocean right now, and yeah, I'm at its lowest low tide pretty much right now. I think it's 10:47, and I think that's what time the tide is changing. And in this location, and maybe sometimes it's different, but today there's no indication that the tide has turned. Like in a lot of places it just happens, and there's no, the waves aren't going to start coming in or anything. And by the way, it's a remarkably calm day, so there's almost no waves out there, just a few ripples. So I thought that I would come down and stand in the Bay of Fundy. And so far, it's the tide change is kind of imperceptible. There are a few ripples now that seem to be coming this way. So maybe if I was more familiar with this area, I'd be able to say, oh yeah, that's the tide just changed because there's, the ripples have changed or that sort of thing. But I'm just not that familiar. And I also wanted to come down here before the tide changes, because I wanted to show you how far the tide will come up. So if you look behind me as I turn, way, way back there, you can see some cliffs over my shoulder and then some trees on top of the cliffs, and that's how far the tide is going to rise today and every day, twice a day. So I think I'll start walking back up. I do not want to get caught stuck out here on a tiny little shoal as the tide comes up around me. I don't want to go for a swim today, and I don't want to have to call for help either. I think that would be pretty silly. So I'm going to start heading back up towards the cliffs. I just want to add to that me saying I don't want to get caught in the tide. For me to walk back to the cliffs, which is where I'm headed, will only take a few minutes, and the tide itself takes like about 3 to 4 hours to get there. So I don't want you to think I'm in a big panic. There's no panic. I can just very slowly stroll back. I'm approaching the cliffs. I've almost reached them. And I want to give you a good close-up of what they look like. It's a little bit more sandy up here. I'll be walking into the shadow of the cliffs. So there's some big rocks right along the cliffs here that look like they've fallen off. And now, actually, it might be hard to capture this, but I'm actually kind of standing underneath an overhang. But this is really, really cool. You can see like where the waves are sort of eroding everything out here. The ripple pattern in the sand right here is like really, really kind of neat too. A little bit of rocks falling off the cliff there. It scared me. I thought it was like an animal. But it's not. It was some pebbles falling down the cliff. I can hear the float. There's a plane buzzing around here today, and I'm really jealous. God, it would be such a good day to go for a spin in an airplane on the Bay of Fundy. So I'm gonna get up close and personal here. So there's these little like holes almost, or these little like grottos or mini grottos, like little baby caves in this cliff. It's so cool. Oh my gosh, I just noticed that's ice. The white areas that you can see all along here, ice. And icicles. Wow. There are caves like this all up and down this cliff. Like the whole cliff face is full of these little hidey holes. Some of them are very accessible, like this one, and others require a little bit of like climbing, and there's some slippery surfaces. But this one was just too tempting. I was like, I can get in this one. The rock going down here is, it's like sandstone and fairly grippy and not like a big slope. So I had to get in. It's really cool. Like this is all sandstone above me, and when I touch it, there's bits of sand kind of falling off. What a great little cave. One thing I really like about coming here to Burntcoat Head is that there's no real trail to speak of. I mean, there's a very short trail from the parking lot to get down to the beach, but once you're down here, you just kind of wander. Like there's no set path, so you can explore pretty much everywhere, and I love how open it is, I guess. I don't get a ton of opportunities to explore really wide open spaces because a lot of the terrain here in Nova Scotia, or the terrain that I explore, is forested. So there just isn't like a lot of opportunity to just kind of like wander around and look around. And that's something that I find it very like different, I guess, about this park, is that there's no designated trail here. It's very refreshing to come to a place that's like wide open. This is the Lighthouse at Burntcoat Head. It's not a functional light anymore, but it looks like now it's a gift shop and maybe an interpretive center. So let's go check it out. Let's see if we can climb up to the top and get a view from that tower up there. Just walking up the stairs from the second floor of this Lighthouse is sort of like an interpretive center. The first floor is a gift shop, and I can feel the heat, as you can see in this sign. No airflow. Oh boy, it is hot up here. Oh, and check out, before I go up, check out these stairs. I would call that a ladder, not stairs. Ah, and there is the top of the tower. I'll climb carefully up here. Oh, wow, great view. Oh, Oh, and there's the island. Ooh, that's so cool. Oh boy, it is really, really hot in here. Oh, really nice view of the park though, and this farm out behind the park. And some cottages. Those are Shangri-la cottages. I have not had the chance to stay there yet. Great view of some of the cliffs and the muddy, muddy brown water. So you can see up here, the difference in color in the water is pretty great. So out here, let's see, out just right along here, you can see kind of the water is blue, and then closer to shore it's brown. And that's because the ocean floor is primarily like that red sand, I guess. And when the tide comes in, it stirs it all up and causes the water to be that reddish brown color. And you can kind of see the limits of where the flats are, just like out here where the water kind of changes color. And the waves change a little bit too. If you'll notice, you can see like it's a little bit choppier in closer to the shore where all the little white caps are. Those waves would be caused by the water being on the shelf, on that like red sandy shelf, and then beyond that is deeper water. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this multi-dimensional trip through time here at Burntcoat Head Park. If you do get a chance to visit the park, try to come on a day when you can experience both high tide and low tide, because it really is best experienced under both of those conditions. I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you for watching, and Donnie Wanders. We'll see you in the next one.